Definition of supply. Supply is defined as the producer's ability and willingness to supply different quantities of goods and services at different possible prices and time range. A supply schedule will show a series of alternative possibilities of quantities being supplied at different prices. The first one is, there is an incentive to supply more at higher price as it may generate increased revenue and profits. Second one, the price of related goods and inputs such as energy, raw material, and labor affect supply as they contribute to increasing the overall price of the good sold. The law of supply. The law of supply states that when the price of a good itself increases, the quantity supplied for the good will increase, and when the price of the good decreases, the quantity supplied will decrease. In other words, the law of supply shows a positive relationship between the quantity supplied and the price of the good itself. However, the law is only true by assuming other factors influencing supply are held constant. For example, only the price of the good itself changes. Therefore, the supply curve will generally be upward sloping, indicating the positive relationship between the price of a good or service, P, and the quantity supplied, Q. Individual supply and market supply. There are two types of supply, which are the first one, market supply curve. This curve can be derived by a horizontal summation of all individual supply curves. For example, by adding up all the quantities supplied by all sellers in the market at each price. Second one, individual supply. This refers to the supply of goods and services from a single seller.
Number 4. Change in quantity supply and change in supply. The change in quantity supply is shown by a movement along the same supply curve. It is caused by the change in the price of the good itself, while other factors influencing supply remains unchanged. On the other hand, the change in supply is caused by relevant factors other than the price of the product, which will involve the shift of the supply curve. The price of the good itself will not be the cause of a change supply. Bear in mind that the factor determining a change in quantity supply is the price of the good itself. Next, difference between change in quantity supply and change in supply. Number 1. Change in quantity supply. Change in quantity supply is shown by a movement along the same supply curve. The change in quantity supply is caused by the change in the price of the good itself. If the price of the good increases from P0 to P2, the quantity supply also increases from Q0 to Q2 units. The increase in quantity supply is known as expansion in supply. If the price of the good decreases from P0 to P1, the quantity supply also decreases from Q0 to Q1 units. The decrease in quantity supply is known as contraction in supply. Number 2. Change in supply. Change in supply causes the entire supply curve to change, involving a rightward or a leftward shift of the supply curve. The change in supply is caused by other factors influencing supply, whereas the price of the good itself remains unchanged. There will be an increase in supply if the supply curve shifts rightward from S0 to S2. Price remains at P0, but quantity supply has increased from Q0 to Q2. There will be a decrease in supply if the supply curve shifts leftward from S0 to S1. Price remains at P0, but quantity supply has decreased from Q0 to Q1.
Determinant of supplies. The supply for a product is influenced by many factors. Here are some of the determinants of supply. It is vital to recognize this factor for better understanding, especially for suppliers to be able to study their market better. First of all, price of the good itself. When prices change, quantity supplies will change, and this will cause a movement along the same supply curve. A change in price does not shift the supply curve. Second, cost and availability of the factors of production. If there is an increase in wages, the cost of the production will increase, but the profit of supplies will decrease, thus reducing the supply of goods and shifting the entire supply curve leftward. Changes in the price of related good is divided into two parts. The supply of a good will decrease if there is an increase in the price of the substitute goods. Take for example a normal sport car and a hybrid sport car. A producer who responds to the higher price of a hybrid sport car by increasing the quantity supply of hybrid sport car that are produced, result in the supply of normal sport car declining. This situation happens because some of the resources now are being used to produce hybrid sport car. Goods in joint supply or complementary good. Joint supply good or complementary good refer to goods which are supplied at the same time. For example, beef and leather are supplied at the same time when a cow is slaughtered. When the price of beef increases, the quantity supply for beef will increase, and the supply of leather will also increase. Level of technology. Higher technology level allow a smaller quantity of resources to be used for the production, which in turn reduce the cost of production. Thus increase the supply of a product by shifting the entire supply curve rightward. Government or economic policy. Government policy consists of taxation and subsidies. When the production of goods is taxed, this increases the cost of production and reduce the amount of profit earned. Producer expectation of future price. If the producer anticipates that the future price of goods will increase, the producer will supply less at the present time. Hence, this will decrease the supply of goods. Number of suppliers. With more supply, more output can be produced in the market. Supply will increase and will shift to the right.
Exceptional supply. There is an exception to the law of supply, whereby a supply curve can bend backwards, so that an increase in price will result in a fall in the quantity supplied. The exceptional supply curve is called the backward bending supply curve, which is commonly used to study the relationship between wages offered and the number of working hours. An example of exceptional supply curve happens in the stock market, when prices are expected to drop further. When the stock prices are expected to fall, people will sell their shares even though the prices are falling. Therefore, more shares will be supplied when the prices fall, which voids the law of supply. Interrelated supply divided into two types. Number 1, joint supply. Joint supply refers to two goods which are produced together. When the quantity supplied for one good rises, the supply of the other good also increases. Number 2, competitive supply. Competitive supply occurs when the supply of two goods are competitive in nature. An increase in the supply of one good will result in the decrease in the supply of the other good, and vice versa. Supply of goods and services from an Islamic perspective. In Islam, supply is influenced by Islamic values. A Muslim producer must not produce or sell any goods and services that are forbidden by Islam. In other words, the Muslim producers should supply a sufficient amount of daruriyah goods, which is basic goods, and hajiyah goods, which is comfort goods, before supplying kamaliyah goods, luxury goods. Muslim producers should conduct their business transactions in the best possible manner while respecting their customers. The actions of cheating and mistreating customers or conducting business rudely are considered bad in Islam.